my pleasure to welcome you all in this edition of LINKFEST, Facing Our Time. This event is presented by French Embassy, Alliance Française of Kathmandu, and Nepal Economic Forum. Without further delaying, now in order to start formally our program, I would like to kindly request His Excellency François-Xavier Léger come on stage to say his opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Bonjour and namaskar. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you for today's debate, jointly organized by the French Embassy in Kathmandu, the Alliance Française, and the Nepal Economic Forum. Each year, we propose such a debate on big issues at the end of January, and it has become an important event for us. This year, 2019, is a very special year because we are celebrating 70 years of diplomatic relation between France and Nepal. In order to commemorate, we will be organizing a series of events all along the year, and today's debate is the second one. Today's topic, Facing Our Time, will be extensively discussed by our panel. We'll interact during this session. I am convinced that each of them will bring their own perspective to our discussion. The panel will be moderated by Sujiv Shakya, chairperson of Nepal Economic Forum, with whom we have been collaborating for the past few years. There will be a Q&A, obviously, at the end, and I kindly request all of you to actively participate.
Thank you, Ambassador. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I think for Nepal Economic Forum, it has been a great pleasure to collaborate. This is our 5th edition of LINKFEST we have been doing for the past 2.5 years. I'm just today a glorified timekeeper, and I'll ensure that I'll keep nudging the panelists. We have a wonderful panel. Aruniko Pandey is the Regional Program Manager of ICIMOD. Camille Hennis, next to me, is the founder of COSI Nepal. Shivani Neopani, on the extreme right, she is the director of Ambe Group and also a writer. And then we have Shrinkala Khatiwara, Miss Nepal World 2018, and also the Goodwill Ambassador of 70th anniversary of France and Nepal bilateral relations. So when we are talking about facing our time, so the first word, facing, so we are talking about what is our present made of, how to face what our present demands, and what memories we want to carry of the present. So the panelists are going to mostly talk about their own personal narratives, and we want to make it more of a conversation. And so we begin the first round, and maybe Aruniko, the first round would be as to talking about how do the panelists connect with this topic of facing our time. So Aruniko.
I'm an atmospheric scientist by training. I've been spending the last 7 years working at ICIMOD on regional atmospheric issues of both air pollution and climate change. If I look at facing our time, it's facing what are the challenges for us that we're facing looking into the future, and what do we need to address? And to me, climate change is a very big one. Climate change is not just an increase in temperature, it's a messed up climate system that's happening as a result of an increase in average temperatures. The switch required it's a major switch in energy production, it's a major switch in products, in building materials, in what we consume, in behavior, in our preferences. It's also a major business opportunity. I think there is hope that we can achieve something in the next 12 years, but it really needs a commitment from everyone in this room and beyond. Thank you.
Thanks, Aruniko. I think the big word I'm just taking away is switch. So be ready to switch to that mode in the next round as we talk about switch. So our next speaker, your opening remarks, Camille.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Camille. I'm one of the co-founders of COSI Nepal. COSI Nepal is a small company that tackle the renovation of old private building. So not public building, but private building, in a way that we want to, give them a new purpose, avoid them decaying, avoid them being destroyed, in order for the owners themselves to regain pride in their patrimony. We try to find solutions for local owners to stay in their historical neighborhood and to, revive their ancestor houses and revive the pride of their patrimony. And we look at the present as well when we think of tourism, to find a way that is non-disruptive, that a tourism that would be, let's call it, immersed tourism.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shivani Nyopani, and I'm a director at Ambe Group. We are involved in a lot of manufacturing industries, but I look after the instant noodle division of the business right now. I'm also a published writer. I've written 2 books. Both are fiction. I was a past life journalist. I don't do reporting anymore, but I'm still a political opinion maker. A political analyst, that's another word I use. I want to talk about how we as young people consume media, how we as a nation that's growing want to use technology as our economy grows. Facing our time for me also means dealing with issues of having multiple jobs, multiple careers, multiple professions, and what does that mean as a generation? Because I find that it's not just me, but many people in my generation who are dealing with the similar issues of identity.
Hello everyone, I'm Shrinkala Khatiwada. I am Miss Nepal World 2018, and I'm also very privileged to be the Goodwill Ambassador of the Nepal-France friendship relationship of 70 years. So sitting here, as Suzit mentioned, as a youth icon, I would love to talk about how the youth of today, the Nepali youth of today, view the ongoing scenario of our country, how optimistic they are about the ongoing political and economic changes, how they are viewing social media, like Shivani said, and how social media has been shaping our lives. I would also like to talk about equality, education, and how the youth of today are slowly growing into becoming more socially active, and how they really want to give back to the community.
In terms of, you've represented Nepal, you've taken Nepal, so you've been on the global stage. So what does it mean? And as a youth icon, what do people look up to you for? What are some of the interactions you're having? What is the world you're getting into? And just to relate to some of your opening remarks, maybe we can start that thread and then take the conversation ahead.
What I've realized is that once you are at a public platform, whatever you do or say has this tremendous scope of reaching out to thousands and even millions of people. So for me, to represent Nepal and then to be sitting here as someone who is a public figure, I believe that whatever I say or do can make tremendous impact, and that's what I've been trying to do.
So what could be some of the switches she can influence, or what are some of the switches you are thinking of in terms of what we want to change or what can change as we stare at 2030 and we stare at the impact of climate change?
Well, I think if we stick to Nepal perspective, I think one of the big switches I'd like to see in Nepal, and it's realistic and starting to happen, is a switch away from fossil fuel energy. But switching to cleaner energy, it's a switch away, switching our transport fleet away from fossil fuel, switching our electricity production away from fossil fuel towards clean energy, but also switching to clean cooking. So switching away from cooking with firewood, I think, is a big switch I'd like to see for people's health. I would also like to see a switch of Nepal being an exporter of labor. Far too many people are going and doing manual labor, building other countries' airports, other countries' stadiums, other countries' roads, when we really have a need to build our own infrastructure at home. I'd like the young generation to have opportunities to travel abroad to see the world, but not to be compelled to go abroad to work.
So what have you been observing, and how do you see this panning out over a period of time? And what has been some of your experience or stories you would like to share?
We came, at least in the old patterns areas that I've studied, we came from, people mass destroying their places to to an extent where they get interest in it again. But my concern is that it should come from a core perspective, like it should come from, like, I'm very much worried that we take tourism as a money machine thing and we just renovate for the sake of renovating, but, you know, letting the local people getting away from their own area.
Do you see this, you know, sort of the going back to how you are building your houses to, you know, olden style, and is that going to contribute to, you know, conservation, or is it basically creating a heritage Disneyland?
We should not be creating a heritage Disneyland, but of course we go through conservating. So we have to conserve it, but we should not conserve it just for the sake of creating a money machine. Like, we have to conserve it, we have to preserve it with the local people inside, and for that we have to find way to retain them in.
So there must be a lot of cultural dimensions to it, and how youth look at jobs, work, and maybe, you know, related to that and the larger issue of the portfolio career. Shivani, your remarks.
In terms of the labor shortage issue, it is a major issue in industries as well, and it's not just in industries. I think we see it every day. If you need a plumber or a carpenter or any skilled labor in Kathmandu, it's becoming quite an issue to find people who want to stay, even including people who work for me. I think one foot is always out of the door. I think the reason for this is also our culture of hopelessness, the politics of hopelessness. We don't sit there and we don't think, okay, Nepal can also be a rich, growing, booming economy, and I actually blame that on politics, and we don't have a politics of hope in this country.
If I could jump in briefly, and that's about people having a foot out the door. It's people going for labor, for jobs, but it's also for studies. And yes, there is a huge value in studying abroad, but not for everyone, and not to have to be compelled to it.
I would go back to Shrinkala in terms of, as someone who has benefited from the advent of social media, to someone who's also facing challenges because of social media.
About social media and fake news, this has been something that's been bothering me for quite some time now. There's this news that's been going around which says, Shrinkhalale 12 वर्षको उमेरमा रातो गुलाबको लागि चुम्बन बेचिन्, which means I sold my kiss when I was 12 years old for a red rose. So that was a poem that I wrote for social media awareness about sexual violence and how young girls or young guys view sexual violence and abuse, and they just translated it to be my own personal experience and made a news out of it. So this is how social media has been portraying news in a sense that they are not feeding the public what the reality is. They are giving something that people would love to click.
So we can use media positively also, social media also positively. When we look at people going to a certain temple or going to a heritage site, they post it on Facebook and their Instagram, and then there are people following it, and there's so many people go in, you know. So how do you see that from a positive, or, is that a challenge you see?
To come back to what Shrinkala and everyone has said, I think we could resume or talk about qualityness, no? So me, as far as I'm concerned, look at quality accommodation, fewer but better. And I would say, like, we need quality journalism. It's all resumed to that. Let's stop, this mass production of everything.
One of the things we talked about in journalism school, which was 3 years ago, was about how the media landscape is changing so rapidly that none of us have any clue about what the future of the media is going to look like. And I think that's why, media is extremely important. It's also media is also at a time where no one knows what the future of the media is going to look like. We all know the future is digital, but we don't know what are the paid versions that are going to, if paid versions are going to work.
So how do you see, do you see that switch also taking place, Arniko, as you're working around in terms of, where social media and new media really takes over these issues that are required, where we need to look at a switch around how we consume things, how we produce things, or how we use things?
Well, I think for things that change relatively slowly, like the climate, it is difficult to capture momentary attention. I actually wanted to get back to another point also related to social media and to people's ability to create content. Yes, there's a certain amount of it that's fake news and things like that, but and I think what is missing is for the public and for journalists to learn how to filter what is correct news and what is not. But I think that there's a certain power to being able to create content, put it out for the world to see.
So what, one is the quality side of it. What are some of the things we can do around this? Any thoughts you have, or any thoughts, any of the stuff you are doing relate to this? Yeah.
No, I mean, I think, yeah, it's the word of mouth is wonderful. I mean, today you can really share the right message to people the way you want it as well. I mean, it does not need to be disrupted by others. You can really, for example, as far as Cozy Nepal is concerned, we never use those big booking platforms to book our place, because now the right message can be carried directly to the people.
I just wanted to add on, give credit to social media where it's due, because all the success that we got in Miss World, the project of building a health center for the Chepang community, and what kind of support they've been getting, it's all through social media. And I'm very thankful that we are getting this platform where we can just voice out, we can just spread across anything that we want to, and you don't even really have to be famous. You just need to catch on to the trend, or you just need to have that spark in your post, and then it goes on viral.
Social media is a really, really powerful force for people to decide where they want to go to next. And I think in terms of, that's something we could do as a country as well, make Nepal one of the most Instagrammable countries in the world, and Kathmandu maybe one of the most Instagrammable cities in the world. This is where I feel really sad, because our government is not as forward-thinking. We only come up with these ideas once somebody else has done them.
Before we move out, if anybody would like to have a few minutes of intervention on the issue, their thoughts around inequality in terms of gender. There are multiple facets to this inequality, but since I thought this, when we are looking at facing our time, because that's also related to the impact of climate change, the impact of how we would do business and how we choose our careers. So anybody would want to take up? Yeah, Shrinkala, you want to start off? Yeah.
While we are talking about opportunities, I believe that as a country we are moving very fast ahead in terms of educating girls and bringing them into the same level. We do have the remnants of the history of hundreds of years of patriarchy, but we are getting there. But when we talk about opportunities, there are these tiny societal constraints that's been hindering the growth of the women in our country. Our society is still not accepting of a woman who says that I don't want to marry, I want to continue with my career. If a woman says that I don't want to have kids, then she's looked upon as someone who's trying to destroy the society.
I think to beat the issue of inequality, foremost we have to think about how are we going to educate Nepali people around the country. And the second thing is access to finance. And that is, I think, the greatest problem to get out of this situation of inequality.
Okay, as I want to put you in a spot, for somebody who is looking at Nepal as an outsider who's come in and trying to get into Nepal, how do you look at this whole issue around inequality and the issues that have been just being discussed in terms of how we, and as a society, we function?
As an outsider, for me, there is many things that I wouldn't say do not make sense, but are surprising, and I still see it with the eyes of, reach the difference. So, but for sure, I mean, when I see the people evaluating around me, the men do get the most credit for everything, and the women, if they are around me, that at least they are allowed to work and they are doing something, but still they are not doing it the full spam.
In terms of inequality, I guess we've been talking about two different kinds of inequality. One is culturally imposed inequalities between men and women, and I think it's the young generation, the majority of the country that's in the young generation that most can change things, working together, using social media, maybe with Shrinkala taking a leadership on some of these issues. In terms of inequality, in terms of opportunity to access education, to access finance, I see some really prominent bankers, some really prominent education people in the audience, and I hope to have a lively discussion on how to broaden access to education and to finance.
So we'll take a few questions from the floor.
I remember the word of Donald Trump. He said that we need global warming because in snow, like I studied in Jilin University in China, minus 30 degree, very cold, and people have very bad concept about the snow. So can we change the paradigm by inventing games and other things in this country? Thank you.
You mentioned that education will help a person to think analytically. So how do you define an educated person?
I'm really interested that nobody has brought up the issue of population and population pressure and population control.
My particular question is that as someone who represents an intergovernmental research center and a learning and education center, how receptive is the government and different government agencies to your findings and to findings of similar organization like yours?
Whoever asked me that question, thank you so much. And I think you answered the question while you asked me by asking me if it was multidimensional. The answer is, of course, inequality is multidimensional. I think the solutions to it are also multidimensional.
Trump's tweet about where is global warming when the US is having a few cold days. Climate change is sort of the decade scale average. It's not what's the small up and downs going on, and Trump's an idiot. He doesn't get that. But in terms of your question about how do we promote appreciation of snow and ice and get more tourism into the high mountain areas in the winter, it's actually a good idea to promote some winter festivals to bring in more people. Is the total world population too much for the Earth? Depends on what people consume and how they live. I'm not convinced that it's the biggest elephant in the room. It might be one of them. The level of responsiveness from the governments to us and the level of engagement varies quite a bit. Within the limitations of how governments function, I'm actually pretty pleased with our interaction with the governments. Thank you.
Like Garniko said, Fulchoki barely got any snow, and then we had traffic jam because it's accessible, and Kalinchok is getting all the tourists because of easy access to the place. So it's all about access, and if we can just provide access, accommodation, and activity to the place, then the tourism will surely be booming. The way we post just to gain followers and how we try to idolize our lives, which in fact we all have our ups and downs. This has been affecting a lot of people. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to not be the ideal person. I try to portray what's real in my social media account so that people can view like, oh, okay, Miss Nepal is as normal as we are, so it's all right. So that's the least that I can do, and I think we all should be doing that as well.
Have you ever thought about the intersection of technology and spirituality?
My question is how you can empower the youth people. They can be productively engaged in the country. Thank you.
My question is, as a nation, why haven't we been able to make the switches?
How do you think one can maintain hope in the face of adversity and uncertainty? How you've maintained hope over the past few years?
What can we do really to change the narrative of our country so that there's a culture of hope that we can spread within our country that then becomes the way the world perceives us as well?
The reason I am able to maintain hope is because I have built a community of great role models around me. So while I do business, I work with people like my father, who's an incredible role model to me in terms of what is possible, and my friends who are also who are always constantly pushing me to see beyond the politics of, beyond everyday politics that we have in Nepal.
I think there's why hasn't it happened yet? Partly it's only that we're just getting into having enough supply of clean energy to be able to imagine it. To a large extent, it's the role of the government to create the environment for it to happen, but there's also a role for us on stage, for example. I switched to an electric car 2 years ago, and I think there's an opportunity for setting examples as well. Thank you.
When we talk about education, we teach them B.Ed, ISC, these subjects that thousands others are studying as well. And so the difference that we need to make is teach them something that they are good at. Teach them agriculture, teach them fishing, teach them farming, teach them something that's been handed down to them through generations and generations, and that's what they can take a lead on, and that's how they can grow.
If from an outside perspective, full of potential, and especially if you tackle grassroots, if you tackle citizen itself, like individuals. If you look at individuals, there is so many things that is possible to be done, and so many things that is happening. So I think we should just rely on us and do the thing.
Our time of consumerism. What is it doing to social media? What is it doing to climate? What is it doing to our culture and society?
What is Nepal good at? Why are we not focusing on what people come here in millions to see, and rather it seems like we're constantly trying to innovate and reinvent and rebrand ourselves to provide what the world wants.
Yeah, I'll just answer the question about French tourists. I would say that just send more Nepali people to Alliance, so like they learn French, because we are very bad in English, and I think it would make people more secure to know that they have a large French-speaking auditorium. So yeah, that's all. Thank you very much for inviting me today, and it was a pleasure to share that time together.
I think we need to really focus on tourism, and that I really believe is what our country needs right now, and we need to catch that one track. Yeah, I'm very privileged to be sitting alongside such influential people on the stage, and thank you so much for all the amazing questions and for listening to us, and this was definitely an eye-opener for me as well. I learned a lot, and I hope these kinds of events get a lot of space in the future. Thank you so much.
I think Nepal is and should be good at many things, but more so, we have such a diverse landscape, such a diverse country, as you just mentioned. I think different places should be good at different things, and when we need clarity about it, not the same kind of urbanization throughout the country.
Going back to my previous point on having role models, I think even in Nepal, if we start building companies and start building like a new startup, like Camille's startup, Cozy Homes, is a great example of preserving Nepali ethnicity and Nepali identity, Newari architecture. Thank you all very much for being here. It's really amazing to see a house full audience who's really engaged with the conversation. And I'm also really thankful to all the incredible panelists here. I've learned so much from just being a part of this conversation today.
Conversations like this has to also be time-bound, and that's what I enjoy moderating. Thank you all to panelists, and a big round of applause to the panelists, and I think Pauline would come and make the closing remarks.
We would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their inspiring thoughts. Shivani Naipani, Aniko Pandey, Shrinkala Katiwada, and Camille Yanes. Quality as a solution to face our time could be a quote to remember from today's discussion, among many others. Many thanks to the Nepal Economic Forum for your ideas and great cooperation in preparing this event with the French Embassy to Nepal. I would also like to thank Hotel Himalaya and my precious team of Alliance Française Kathmandu for the organization. Thank you all for attending today's discussion. You can keep an eye on Alliance Française Facebook page. We don't share fake news, but we will inform you about the next event we will organize for the 7th anniversary of friendship between France and Nepal. Merci, Danya Bat.